the balance beam, the way I look at it is what you have on either side may vary based on the season of life or work that you're in. So giving yourself the permission and the freedom to embrace that as needed versus having this really rigorous, like, oh, all things must be 50%. Yeah. And it's like, actually, maybe the goal is to get to 100% every time. And the weighting is going to shift over time, and that's okay.
Welcome back to the CultureCon podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Zach. We're the co-founders of CultureCon and your hosts for the show.
This episode is part of a special series we created live on site in our podcast studio at CultureCon West 2025 in Las Vegas.
To capture these conversations, we partnered with our friends at the People Forward Network, our podcast media partner. A huge thank you to Nikki Llewellyn-Gregory, who stepped in as host for these live studio sessions.
These episodes feature real-time insights, stories, and leadership lessons shared during the conference, giving you a front-row seat to the energy and impact of CultureCon.
And we're excited to bring you along. Let's dive into today's conversation.
Hey, it's Nikki, and we are here live in Vegas for CultureCon West. Look at this view. I keep saying how amazing it is, and I feel so fortunate to be here with my new friend, Sam. And Sam and I had a chance to prep for this episode, and I'm so intrigued by this concept that I want to dig right into and go deep on, which is helping the helpers. And that was a new phrase for me. And you explained a little bit, but I want to go deeper so I can learn and we can share that with many other leaders today. Where does this come from?
Absolutely. Well, it comes from where so many wonderful things in life originate, Mr. Rogers. So for those folks who are familiar with his show, and I shared this in my session earlier today as well, he had a quote about the fact that if you saw something distressing on the news, his mother would say, look for the helpers. And so I relate that to HR by essentially saying that while we don't respond to emergencies out in the real world, we are first responders to things that come up in workplaces globally. And so people do look at us to go, should I freak out right now? Should I remain calm? What are my next steps? We give folks permission with our behavior and our leadership. But who's there to do the same for us when it's an emergency or we need something? And how do we make sure while we help others, we also help ourselves?
So good. You just hinted at it, but I want you to tell us a little bit more about the way that the world has changed and accelerated and why this is more of a need than ever to understand this concept and take action on it. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. You know, as I was reflecting on this, I was thinking about that word unprecedented during COVID times and how we overused it. But I do actually think that we were already dealing with a really dynamic world working in the people business before COVID. And then I think COVID presented this huge challenge culturally, not just in workplaces, but societally too, right? We all learned a lot about ourselves. And in the process, whether it was the pandemic or return to office mandates or AI or who knows what, we've all been kind of adjusting to recognizing the only thing that's really certain is uncertainty. We don't have any control over the economic conditions. We don't have any control over how consumers are going to react to certain things and the ways in which all playbooks are being rewritten across the different areas of our business. But for the things that we do have control over, how do we get really good at thinking about the things we naturally do really well, which structures, systems, policies that are equitable, fair, thoughtful? How are we building those around ourselves as well to make sure we're not only taking better care of ourselves, but we're optimizing for what we do have control over?
Let's put those in a few different buckets, if you will, that we're going to break down today. I remember you talking about boundaries and that being one that I think we can all sharpen on.
Yes.
I remember you talking about balance. Remind me if there was a third one that we're going to break down today. We'll definitely go deeper on boundaries and balance.
Ooh, blank checks is something I talked about earlier that we can discuss. I have I think it's a great analogy. You all will have to tell me if it is or not.
Well, this is intriguing. I want to start there.
On the blank check?
Yeah.
As I was putting together the materials for helping the helpers, I was thinking about how often we say, hey, let me know if there's something I can do, because we're trying to be nice, trying to be thoughtful. But we don't recognize that, especially in times of stress or where we have limited capacity, that actually is sometimes giving someone a blank check on our time and the type of helping they would like us to commit to. So then we can't be frustrated if they show up and they're like, actually, I thought about it and I want you to help at this level and give this amount of time. And that doesn't always jive with what we can give. We never predicted they could do that, but we are in the profession where we know how creative people can be. And yet we still issue sometimes a blank check. So my advice is to actually get specific. And if you aren't sure the way you can help, pause and come back to it versus feeling the necessity to respond in the moment. And then open yourself up to doing something that you don't actually have time to do. And also not recognizing there's different ways to help. There isn't just one way that's super immersive, one-to-one. There's other ways to also provide quality care, quality support without always going really, really deep and being able to maintain my next area, boundaries.
Yeah.
So we had a good discussion today around like what boundaries are supposed to actually do, right? Boundaries keep us safe. They help us recognize when we've hit our limits or we're exceeding them. They also are a way to help us feel like we have some semblance of control when everything else is outside of it. So when we decide to step over a boundary, we are doing so knowing the risks, and was like, hey, I actually set this thing so that I do know my own limits, so that I am safe, so that I can maintain a calm, strategic head when I have to weigh in on things. And discussing today, like, how often are we honoring our boundaries versus breaking them and normalizing it, right? And of course, there was a lot of knowing, sort of internal murmurs and nods about the fact that we're probably breaking them more than we're honoring these days.
Yeah. And I'm going to dig into that in a minute. Some concepts or ideas or examples on how to stick to that for the best of us, for our health, for our best selves. A couple of questions so far on the two buckets that you've shared, but let's go ahead and talk about balance.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to come right back and we'll get some depth and some examples.
Yes. And balance is such a tricky word. I think it got a very bad rap. I can't remember if it was like around the time that folks were talking more about leaning in or things like that. But balance is really, I do like the concept because it essentially is saying that the balance beam, the way I look at it is what you have on either side may vary based on the season of life or work that you're in. So giving yourself the permission and the freedom to embrace that as needed versus having this really rigorous, like, oh, all things must be 50%. Yeah. And it's like, actually, maybe the goal is to get to 100% every time. And the weighting is going to shift over time, and that's okay. So on balance, I think it's defining what your balance is and providing flexibility with your methods to get there.
I like that you brought up how some people might get a little triggered by the word balance. They're like, it's not possible. Right. Like it is not possible to have, 5% in each or 15% in each. The whole idea is integration, right? And some seasons of life need more of this than that, but we're being consciously aware of what's needed and helping to lead others to understand that as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you're triggered by the word balance, it's just a different version.
Integration is a lovely word as well. It's a perfect word instead of balance. Whatever it is, it's yours. Define it on your terms.
Exactly. I love that. So when we think of these three different concepts that you're sharing, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we break our commitments to boundaries more than the others. Like all of us can sharpen. There's nobody that's like, I'm perfect at this, right? If you know them, can I hire them as my coach? What are some of the things that you've learned for yourself that have helped you honor those and stick to those, and also how you lead that for others and help them honor their boundaries?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I certainly struggle with it. I mean, our jobs are inherently selfless, right? We are really good at thinking about what's for the best of the whole, right? And ultimately what's going to be a rising tide. And naturally, when you're in the people business, a lot of what you talk about is like people, caring about them, worrying about them, instituting change, helping your leaders to do a better job of leading them. So how often do you get to kind of come back to yourself to go like, okay, am I getting what I need? Who is the HR for HR, right? And sometimes that means kind of, building an external board of advisors who can help you sort through things in a thoughtful, discreet way. I always say have friends who are other HR people, so you have folks who you can consult and who have discretion and understand and can maybe help you think through a hard problem. And then separate from that, whether it's therapy or coaching or whatever, what you need to kind of bring you back. For me, therapy is super important. So is taking intentional breaks and recognizing signs of burnout. Burnout usually occurs when you have trouble refueling. No amount of time off can sort of quell this sort of bottomless pit of fatigue. It's just continuously there. And what do? We work through it. We're like, well, I've always worked really hard. What's different? Come on, body respond. And your body's like, no, time out. I was thinking of like the Inside Out Pixar movie, which I'm a big fan of. If you haven't seen Inside Out 2, you definitely need to run, don't walk to it because anxiety is real. But I think that because of that reason, we tend to fall into that cycle, the natural proclivities of our role to be selfless. And then also because we tend to believe that the way we worked in the past will work today when we're encountering actually different types of challenges. And they're more complex and they're more constant as well. Those are two really important differences. And that's what I mean by like acknowledging the season of life that you're in. So those are things that have worked for me, in addition to just having a really open dialogue with my boss, being able to name like, hey, I'm burning at both ends here. I need to have a trade-off conversation versus an addition conversation. So I know you have this big thing. Can we put this other thing on hold? Can we delay it? Or how important is it? And always assessing on priorities along that line of effort and impact. If something is high effort but low impact, I cannot do it. Like if you're just in certain seasons where you're like, looks nice, I just can't pick that up. But if it's high effort, high impact all day, I can't have a lot of those though, right? Because how much can I do in 90 days time to really move the needle while also responding to things that come up day to day? So just methods like that, where the sum of them give you some tools to, you can't prescribe what's going to come at you each day, but if you have the right set of tools, you'll feel a lot more confident knowing you can handle it and not burn yourself at both ends in the process.
This is such a good illustration of well-being, right? We're really looking at this, many of these concepts rolling up under what does well-being look like when we lead that for ourselves and for others. Self-advocacy is a huge piece of the thread that I'm hearing through this. And, in that, I believe it takes a lot to do the deep inner work so that we can know ourselves, love ourselves, and be confident enough so that we are our own advocate and honor the boundaries because we're worth it, right? So good. So tie all this together underneath the helping the helpers. We're here at CultureCon. There are a lot of chief people officers, head of culture, head of HR, and they're looking for these new nuggets of how can I take these actions back to move my people forward in bigger ways, more meaningful work. Tie that together as you're sharing this message around be the helper of the helpers. What does that look like in summary?
No, it's a great question. I would say there are a few guardrails that I shared with folks as we were wrapping up the session that I think are true. And I would say to any HR person who's struggling with this, one is that you have to have time to think. It sounds like such a simple thing, but it is so important. We're being asked sometimes to weigh in on really serious stuff. And the tendency is to just respond because we see our response tied in some ways to the value we can provide. But sometimes the value means it takes time to get to a quality answer. So slow down. Allow time to process and share that with people. Sometimes I'll qualify and say like, hey, I can give you an answer right now, but I am running a little on empty. It's the end of the day. I'd love to be able to come back to you tomorrow with a better quality answer once I've considered all the things. So many people aren't going to say no to that, right? Like they're like, I want high quality. And I was like, I don't want whatever Sam's got left at the end of the day. So even though what I have is usually pretty great, it's just not tip top shape.
Totally.
So I think that's really important. The other thing is how you ensure you're honoring your clarity. when we often get through a crisis or a change, we never do an after action review. We just move on to the next thing. But as you learn things, that's data. How are you applying it to optimize, right? Like when you learn something about a leader or the pace of an organization or the preferences of someone, how are you adjusting to make sure that you're working smarter, not harder, and encouraging your team to do the same thing? Again, so you optimize, right? Like, wow, that change or that process was really hard. How do I take from that and apply it so that it's less hard, at least for those reasons going forward? And the other one is like the micro wellness moments. So hydrating, actually using the standing desk that can stand and standing it up every once in a while, going for a walk around the office, or having defined offline hours. I actually have something in my signature that says something like, your workday may not look like my workday. Don't feel obligated to respond outside of your work hours. I will tell you, it never ceases to amaze me the people within my organization and outside of it who call it out and say, I love this. And I think why they're drawn to it is because I'm giving people permission.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, hey, my workday is my workday, right? Like I got my off hours, I got my on hours. I'm sending you this message, but I don't expect you to respond. And if I did, I'd probably be calling you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, such a good reminder. Well, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked a lot here in this studio about the ripple effect of working on these kinds of practices for ourselves, because when we model it, right, it's all about not what we say, but what we do.
100%.
And how that impacts the people we lead, how that impacts the dinner tables of the people that they're with at night, the communities they serve in.
Yes.
So thank you for the great work you're doing. And thank you for spending time here with us live at CultureCon today.
Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, a teammate, or a fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you want more ways to stay connected and inspired, check out our upcoming events page for a full listing of webinars, workshops, and conferences.
You'll find the link in the show notes, and we'd love to welcome you to a CultureCon event soon.
Until next time,